I'm Fatima and I'm Egyptian and I speak English and Arabic. I went to UWC East Africa in Tanzania and here I study sociology and mathematics. I'm really interested in sociolinguistics.
I am Asab Julia from Cameroon. I speak both French and English. Student here at Promise College, and I'm glad to be part of this project.
I'm Rubidaisha Marufu. I am a Zimbabwean student. I speak Shona and English fluently. I went to UWC Dojan in Armenia, and I'm a double major in biology and political science.
I speak both French and English. This is to say that Cameroon is a bilingual country. This goes back to colonization, obviously. So in Cameroon, I would say we have two main types of educational system. We have the Francophone educational system and we have the Anglophone educational system. Both systems could be at some point similar, but there's also some differences. The main difference is actually the language. The system also varies because it has been established according to two different colonial masters. In primary school, I went to a bilingual school, so I studied both in French and in English for primary. When I went to secondary school, I did the Anglophone educational system only.
In terms of what languages are spoken, I think we're the country with the largest number of official languages. So it really depends on who you're speaking to and where their family is from particularly. But in terms of the educational system, we mostly integrate both the native languages and the colonial language, which is English. They place a huge importance on children learning one of the national languages that are traditional, Ndebele and Shona, which are the two largest tribes. In terms of educational development, Zimbabwe is still very tribal in as much as it is modern. For example, within our politics, tribal politics plays a huge role in that. Because of that, you find certain people in certain ranks who are from certain tribes because that tribe speaks a specific language. But then at the same time, if you're in a specific region, it's more advantageous for you to know one language when you're learning, just for your educational journey.
Would you say the educational system in Zimbabwe doesn't have one or two official languages through which people study?
We use the British system, so the Cambridge International General Certificate. So IGCSE is the high school version, and the primary school version is ZIMSEC, which is the Zimbabwe National Board. And in that, you're required to learn a native language, one of the language requirements. So for example, how you'd have maths, English, science, you'd also have a native language. So you have a large population that is very much aware of one of the native languages and is able to converse casually. It's like in the supermarket or things like that. So for example, in Shona, what we learn in school isn't necessarily what I speak at home. It's a different dialect. So it's also really hard bringing up, you know how in education, you're trying to get good grades. How do I get a good grade in this without necessarily using my own dialect, but using the dialect that we're learning?
In Egypt, there is both English and Arabic curriculums. What is very interesting is how people who go to English language schools are associated with being from a higher socioeconomic class. I went to Arabic schools all my life, and when I got to the secondary stage, I was faced by the choice that there are around 5 English schools in my city, but only 2 Arabic schools. So everyone who wants to keep studying in Arabic, unless they want to switch, have to compete for these 2 schools. It is also very interesting that you touched on dialect because Arabic has many dialects and the Egyptian one is drastically different. There are even words that we take from French or words from English and they just become part of the dialect. When I was learning standard Arabic, how do I get good grades without losing the way I speak at home or without mixing them up? It was definitely a challenge. How do you feel language and development are connected?
How I view development and language, I think I'm kind of steered into believing this. Zimbabwe is one of the most literate countries with high literacy rate, and we place a lot of importance on education. What you were saying, people who speak English are of higher, not necessarily social economic status, but you listen to what they're saying more. For example, growing up in the capital, it was always very interesting to hear people speak about people who didn't grow up in the capital have a different accent and people who grew up in the capital. In the capital, you have like British teachers, American teachers, people who are influenced somehow by that. With English also comes accent. People who are also very influential, if they don't have good enough accent, they're not as effective. So I think that's in terms of internally, but then globally, I think the same still stands, wherein, for example, for me to be in the position that I'm in, I couldn't be here without speaking English, being able to articulate in a specific way, but I feel like my country has attempted to push for education in terms of learning different languages, particularly Western languages, because they believe that's how we will be accepted by the global community. And so I think that's how I would view those two together.
We all have our own perspective of what development is. Speaking about language, I live in the economic capital of Cameroon. There are people there that speak their native language. But however, Cameroon as a whole, in different schools, we emphasize on learning either French or English. The educational system is based on those two languages, and we further emphasize on learning other languages, Spanish, German. There's not really a great emphasis on the need to learn our native language in school. People emphasizing about how important our native language are mainly people from our surrounding, your parents, your grandparents. But in school, there's no urge, there's no reminder that this is our culture, we need to speak it, it's important. If you embody your language, you actually build up your identity, you actually embrace your culture, and you can better represent your country at any other stages out of the world. This is not shown within our educational system, and something I personally regret. When I was not yet traveling abroad, I never really realized how important it is to be able to speak your native language until I had friends from different parts of the world who were able to speak in any other languages than French or English. Then I was like, wow, what about me? I can speak just two languages, which is okay. There are people who just speak one language. So I'm like, I can speak two languages at least. But then none of these two languages are my native language. These are languages that were established by other people in my country. Does it mean that I'm not really part of that country that I claim to be from? Because I speak none of my languages, but my parents don't speak the native language. Had they failed at some point, or have I failed at some point?
Was it your family's decision to not teach you the native language?
It's definitely not their decision. I think both of them tried their best to teach us the native language in Cameroon. The issue is that I think no matter how hard you try to show the goodness of something to someone, if the person don't understand it, the person will never really reach where you want the person to be. I mean, like, you have your part to play, I have my part to play. They did theirs, I didn't do mine. Because at that moment, I didn't understood how important speaking my native language was. And one other thing is that both my parents come from two different tribes within the same ethnic group. So there's this issue of having to learn either your father dialect or your mother dialect. And if you learn for one person and you don't learn for another person, there's like, you like one more than the other. Stuff like that, it's hectic. In other friends, it would be like, okay, I'm the dad, you need to learn mine because I'm the man of the family and everything. A whole other discussion. But what I mean is that if at that moment, at least I've understood how important it was to learn my dialect, I would have been speaking at least one of those two dialects today, and I would be more proud of being a Cameroonian. I'm not less, but I rather speak one language.
It's a part of the cultural identity that you feel doesn't make you less of who you are from, but it matters to you personally. So I definitely understand.
Exactly.
I liked what you were saying about how that affects your identity, not knowing your mother language. Because I think I take myself as very privileged in knowing various dialects, but also knowing my mother tongue. And that was very emphasized in me growing up. First, I spoke a mesh of English in Shona, but then I think I've noticed amongst my peers that certain people don't actually know the dialect. And to a certain extent, you feel as if you can't connect to them in the same way that you connect with your own culture. I think right now we're faced with the issue whereby we are the future of the country. But how am I the future of the country if I can't connect with its history? And so in as much as, of course, we're a very literate country, many people speak English, but not everyone speaks English. So what are you going to do about that? How are you going to connect with that demographic? How are you also going to connect with the certain things that can't be translated into English? Because you can't necessarily be speaking of building a dam when you can't focus on the historic site. If I were to predict, I'd say this is the problem that we will have as a continent. They're looking at America and Britain and things like that, but they're not looking at their country. You need to build a house from the foundation and not from the top.